We're going to think just for a few minutes about 4 words that we heard in that last reading that Joe read to us. 4 words from John, one of Jesus' closest friends, one of his disciples. And it's these 4 words here. Oh, back a bit. The Word became. I wonder if you can find the answer in verse 14, if you haven't spotted it already. The Word became. Oh, lots of hands up already. How did that happen? Are you ready? After 3, if you think you know. The Word became flesh. These are words that lots of people often read on Christmas cards at Christmas. Words that we hear often at Christmas, but often are not properly understood. Words that are very familiar to us. The Word became flesh. But we this morning are going to take some time just to try and understand what exactly this means. It is about God coming down to earth. God coming into this world. It is about a moment in history, about the Christmas story when Mary was going to marry Joseph, and then suddenly Mary found that she had a baby inside her. This was the moment when the Word became flesh. This is what John says in the first part of the reading that we heard about the Word who was with God came among us. The Word who was God became flesh. And so, that is our focus for a few minutes this morning. The Word became flesh. And because of that, God knows what we're like. I wonder if you can remember the first time that you ever needed a first aid kit. Or, maybe simpler than that, one of these. The first time that you ever needed a plaster. Can you whisper to the person next to you if you can remember the first time you ever needed a plaster or a bandage? or the magic ice pack at school. A plaster, well, that is just a small reminder of what it means for us to be made of flesh. To be made of flesh. Do you remember the first cut or the first bruise? Can you point to one just now? Can you feel one? Maybe you're wearing a plaster this morning. This finger does not straighten because I dislocated it in an epic football match. And I had to fix it mid-game. And I did not do a very good job. And a doctor friend of mine who comes to church here said, "Oh, it'll be fine." 2 weeks later, he sent me to see a specialist friend of his. And despite all the physio, that's as straight as I can make it. This is a living example of what it means to be made flesh. I'm not joking. I cannot move that. Maybe you have a similar example that you walk around with. A reminder of what it means to be made flesh. Here's another thing that goes with being made flesh. Tissues. I wonder, when was the last time, not the first time, but the last time you needed a tissue because of tears. Because you were crying and you came to mum or dad for a cuddle. Or you turned to somebody else for a cuddle. Or you were on your own and maybe you didn't even have a tissue. Because to be made flesh means that we feel pain, we feel hurt, we get ill, we get tired, we get weary. It means that we are vulnerable. It means we suffer. Our flesh means that life is a battle. It's a struggle. It's hard. It's difficult. I wonder if you can tell me what this sign means, or what you would use this sign for. Anybody know where you would put this sign? Yes, no, Joshua. I got the first bit. Say it all again.
Like a shelf or something.
Yeah.
Like fragile and heavy.
Yeah, maybe on a box or something that you were sending somewhere. Henry? I know, it's sort of the answer's up there, isn't it? It's just sort of just wanting to make the point. And that's my son. And I'm not just picking on someone. This sign, well, do you know what? I reckon that we could actually, most of us, relate to this. That we could put this around us, ourselves. Because life has got a way of making us feel, I can hardly breathe, my life has got a way of making us feel fragile, that we are weak, that we are vulnerable. You don't have to go too long in life to experience that. And do you know what? That's what it was too for Jesus. Because as John tells his story about Jesus, we meet Jesus who, just after his birth, was hated. He had to flee from the hatred of Herod, who wanted to kill him. He knew what it felt to be threatened and rejected, to be tired and weary. He knew what it was like to suffer loss. He wept at the grave of a loved one when a best friend died. He knew what it was like to be betrayed, to be let down by his closest friends, to be misunderstood by his family. What it's like to be treated unfairly, to be hurt. If you punched him, he bruised. If you cut him, he bled. He knew what it was to face his own death. I wonder who here this morning likes to dress up as a superhero. To dress up as a superhero at some point in life. Sometimes we like to do that, maybe when we're small. But that's not real life. Life is hard and life is difficult. And at Christmas, we particularly can feel that. But the thing is, I think we actually get good at dressing up. I think all of us get good at putting on a bit of a show, presenting as if things are okay, presenting as if we're sorted, and presenting as if we've got this. When actually, instead of this being the case, it's more like this. That actually, we are broken people. We carry around things with us. Scars, cuts, bruises from life, from living in this world. A world that is broken. And this is more. We're grinning, we're trying to carry on, but actually, we're broken. Our flesh makes each one of us vulnerable, weak, and frail. But the wonderful news of Christmas is that God knows what we're like. God knows what you're facing, your situation today. Let that be an encouragement. And we'll come back to the next part after the next carol. So the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. And we've thought about how that means God knows what we're like. But it also means that we know what God is like. Not only does God know what we're like, but because the Word became flesh, we know what God is like. In the verse that we read, it goes on to say that John the disciple says, "We have seen his glory," talking about Jesus. And when he says that word glory, he means God's greatness. Now, to understand more of this, we really need to, this is just the start of the story. We need to read on. We need to turn some pages in the Bible to find out just exactly what John is talking about and what he's telling us about Jesus, what he saw in the life of Jesus, what he heard through the words of Jesus. But we can understand just a bit this morning. When he said that we have seen his glory, God's greatness, he wasn't referring to Jesus, his appearance, that Jesus was amazing and looked like a superhero. His glory or greatness was seen because of what Jesus did with his flesh. What he did with his flesh. He put his flesh on a cross. That's what Jesus did with his flesh. He put his flesh on a cross. And that is what John is referring to in saying, we have seen God's greatness. He put his flesh on a cross to save people like us. I wonder if you've heard the story about the little girl who was drawing a picture, and Mum came along and asked, "What are you drawing?" And the little girl said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." Mum thought, don't want to discourage too much, but I don't know how you're going to do that. Nobody's ever seen God. We don't know what God is like. To which the girl very quickly replied, "Well, when I finish my picture, everybody's going to know what God is like." But John is saying that because Jesus came, we don't have to guess about what God is like. We don't have to guess anymore. We can know what God is like because the Word became flesh. Jesus shows us what God is like. And this is the best news ever. Jesus shows us that God is really there. He shows us more than that, though. He shows us that God is for us, that he's not against us. He shows us that God has stepped towards this world in all its brokenness, that God came down to earth and all the way on to the cross. He became flesh so that he could die on a cross. And he did this for people like us, to take the punishment for my sins, for our sins, so that anyone who trusts in him can become one of God's children. That's the great promise in the opening part of John's story that we read earlier. So the question for us as we finish is, what will we do with Jesus this Christmas? Imagine discovering for a moment that you have a long-lost uncle, and you're starting to find out what he's like. And you start to find out that he's quite old, he's bald, and got some glasses, and you sort of think, well, okay, that doesn't really change my life or affect anything. But then imagine you find out more about what he's like. You find out that he loves you very much. He wants you to know him, and he wants to gift you £1 million inheritance. Well, that's a whole different sort of information. That is the sort of information where you have got to do something about that. You would want to get to know that uncle. What we're hearing this morning about the Word becoming flesh is not just to let us know that God is there. It's like the second part of that illustration. He wants us to know him, that he's for us, and that his desire is to bless us and to welcome us into his family as his children. So that's different from saying that we are all already God's children. It's saying, no, he wants to welcome us as his children. So the question is, what will you do with Jesus this Christmas? Will you move towards him in the pages of the Bible to find out more about why he had to go to the cross, to die, to save people? That is the greatest news you can understand, and it's the whole point of why Jesus, the Word, became flesh. We would love for you, if you're visiting, to come back to St. John's and to investigate more here with us. We'd love to talk today, if that would help as well. But this really is the most wonderful thing that we can understand and share with you this morning, and indeed celebrate as we sing in a moment how wonderful it is that the Word became flesh.